tutorial happens to be we're discussing about the concept of diplomacy. Let's hop straight into it. Okay, so we have and we have the concept of diplomacy. We are taking a bare form for today, the concept of diplomacy. Okay, now in our last class we said some things about diplomacy. Okay, we said certain things about diplomacy, and among one of the things we said about diplomacy was that when it comes to building good relationship, when it comes to building good rapport with international bodies or international states, all right, relationship between one country and the other, then diplomacy is highly essential. Okay, so in line with what we discussed in our last class, we are going to be continuing. All right, we're going to continue from where we stopped. All right, we're going to be talking about what is the scope, how far, the why, the depth of what we refer to as diplomacy. Now, one thing we need to understand here is that the study of diplomacy as an academic activity has been, okay, has been misconstrued over the years. Okay, the study of diplomacy as what we refer to as academic, all right, activity has been misconstrued over the years. Now, some scholars think it is the summation of nations' foreign policy. All right, some scholar thinks is what summation, the summation of a nation's foreign policy. Okay, some scholars think it's a summation of a nation's foreign. Okay, some scholars think it is the summation of a nation's foreign policy. Okay, while others sees it as merely, okay, while others sees it as merely, all right, sees it as merely what we refer to as projecting the interest of nations in international community of conflicting and competing interests. All right, some sees it as just what we have been told now, that the projection or the projecting of a nation interests, the projecting of a nation interests, okay, of a nation interest in international, are we together, community, all right, interest internationally, all right, in conflicting or competing, all right, situations. Okay, so now, yet others sees it as a now for the newly emerging course referred to as peace studies. All right, some other scholar sees it as the newly emerging discipline referred to as peace studies. Now, all this we have been saying suffice to say that diplomacy as a field of study has found a place in the curriculum of many universities in Britain, Europe, and the United States. Now, it is studied distinctively from other aspects of international relation as well. All right, don't forget we are talking about the scope, the wide, the depth of uh, diplomacy. Okay, so we have that as that. Now let's continue. Okay, now we need to understand something about diplomacy, that diplomacy thrives in projection of states' national interest in the international community. All right, diplomacy thrives. I said that earlier. All right, in projecting, diplomacy thrives in projecting of a state's, okay, national's interest in international community. This is where diplomacy thrives a lot. Also, more than any other thing, when we talk about international economics, trade, and commerce, all right, trade and commerce shapes a nation's interest, and the state always seeks to define and maintain this through diplomacy. All right. When we talk about commerce and international relation, all right, which helps to boost every nation's economy, all right, every nation employs the use of diplomacy in achieving, all right, in achieving this. Now, one thing we also need to understand is that diplomacy and communication must work together. Diplomacy and communication must work together. Definitely. All right. Communication encapsulates, all right, all the activities of diplomacy. All right. And don't forget, communication is not just by speaking, it's not just by oral communication. There are a lot of communications, body languages, certain actions, all these things, communication takes place. All right. So that we've been told here that diplomacy and communication must work together in order to get a desired diplomatic result for a state. Now, strategic study in an integral part of diplomacy in order to get state business done. All right. So there is need for strategies. All right. When it comes to diplomacy, there is serious need for strategy. All right. It goes a long way in to achieve the state business done. Okay. So we have peace and peace studies and conflict resolution makes extensive use of diplomacy. Okay. Peace studies and conflict, all right, makes what? Extensive use of diplomacy. Yeah. In some of our courses that we've talked about prospectively, especially when it comes to conflict resolution, diplomacy plays, all right, an important, very important, plays an important role when it comes to making peace, all right, long-lasting peace and resolutions. So we have that as that. Now let's take a step further. Now let's consider the fact that diplomacy also has history. All right. Now, when we talk about diplomacy history, we are simply referring to, all right, tracing back the genesis, all right, tracing the genesis of diplomacy. How does it come about? Don't forget that everything has a genesis. So, what is the genesis of diplomacy? Then we talk about diplomacy history. Now, the history of diplomacy, okay, the history of diplomacy can be traced from the earliest times through the medieval period to the Italian city states and even to the pre colonial period. All right. it can be traced to the medieval, okay, that is me, okay, medieval, medieval era, from the medieval era. Okay, can we all hear me? That can be traced from the medieval era, okay, through the, all right, medieval period through the, all right, Italian city states. Okay, okay, we thank you very much for that, Miss Regina. Thank you for confirming that. Okay, now let's continue. Okay, through the medieval era, talking about the very ancient and archaic time, to where civilization, all right, start cropping in, to as well the uh, the pre-colonial period. Okay, of the pre-colonial period. Okay, so we have that as that. Now, various historical periods, all right, we've seen, according to history, there are various historical periods of diplomacy. Now, let's try and dissect some of these historical periods. Now, diplomacy, even though not in the official form, originated with human existence. All right. So the very first, all right, the very beginning of diplomacy, it was never in its official form. Official form in the sense that now we know that there are strategies, there are steps, there are precepts when it comes to diplomacy. All right. But when it originated at first, from its genesis, there was nothing like formal form of diplomacy. All right. So the issue of mankind is repleted with forms of diplomacy. So you keep seeing the issue of mankind, all right? You see the issue of mankind is surrounded, all right, with speaking diplomacy happening here and there with the issue of mankind. So the issue of mankind is repleted with forms of, all right, mankind history, all right, repleted with what we refer to as diplomacy. Okay. Now, even in the Bible, all right, the Bible recorded it that the Bible records where diplomatic relationship between the Israelites and other, the Israelites and other, by the Israelites, okay, the Israelites diplomatic relationship between other Semitic people of the land. All right. All right. Whereby we notice that the Israelites, speaking of the um okay, speaking of the Israelites and people of, all right, Canaan, all right, people of Canaan. Those a single N and AA. That is biblically speaking. We've also seen it, all right, in we also have a record that Quran also stressed the existence of diplomatic relation between Arabs and other people, all right, Arabs and other people, all right, of the world, and other Arabs and other people of the world. Okay. Now, after the primitive society came the medieval Europe system, which manifested as the collapse of the Holy, all right, Rome Empire. Now that we've gotten instances that we've seen the Israelites and the Canaan, Arabs, and other parts of the world, cases and instances of diplomacy happening during this era, we also need to note that still talking about the diplomacy, all right, still talking about the history of diplomacy, we also have when the European system, all right, at the manifestation of the European system. All right, we've seen cases of diplomacy at the manifestation of this European system. All right, and this European system manifested at the collapse. All right, it manifested at the collapse of the Holy Roman Empire. All right, manifested at the end of the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, so we have this period was characterized with ethnic, religious, political, and ideological, all right, disputes. Okay, now it was in fact referred to as the Dark Age. All right, the Dark Age is an era, it is a time characterized by ethnic, religious, political, and ideological disputes. Now, the spread of Islam, however, took a check on the total collapse of diplomacy then. All right, it took a check on the total collapse of diplomacy, whereby we have in the 15th century the Italian city states established permanent diplomatic missions. All right, so over time in history, all right, like we said something like over time in history, all right, history has it that mankind always get to have certain misunderstanding on certain things, and you see disputes occurring, conflicts occurring between these groups, different groups and sets, right? And just like what we are told in our last class, that in as much as conflict starts from the arts, then solution to conflict should also start from the arts, all right? So you see that even as mankind goes into war, same mankind still think of strategies of how to make peace with each other, all right? And as you can see, from one age, one dispensation, one generation to another, in as much as conflict exists, this diplomacy follows as suit. All right, like what we have been told here again that in the 15th century, so now the 15th century witnessed okay, the 15th century witnessed the Italian city states, all right, establishing permanent diplomatic mission. All right, so that is the Italian city state. City state establishing permanent, right, diplo, all right, permanent diplomatic mission, all right, mission that is only existing for diplomacy sake. You can imagine for the Italian city state to have this permanent diplomacy mission, that means there is need, all right. This era has seen the need for less disputes, more understanding, all right, more approaches to settling disputes amicably and not with violence. So we have that as that. Now let's take a step further. All right. So now we have, so according to what we have here, it says, okay, it says that by this period, the Greek, Egyptians, Assyrians, and the Roman only establish what we call ad hoc envoys. Now, what are we saying here? That in as much as certain progress has been made, like permanent diplomatic mission by the Italian city states, other cities, other states, other countries too, all right, saw the need to accept, all right, to settle things amicably rather than through violence. Now we saw the likes, all right. We also saw, all right, let's note the likes of the Westphalian, all right, the Treaty of Westphalia, treaty, peace agreement or peace arrangement, Treaty of Westphalia, all right, not Western, just West, okay, Phalia, Westphalia, the Treaty of Westphalia, still talking about diplomacy. All right, this treaty, when we even talk about treaty, the word treaty itself is, we don't want war again. Let's come into an agreement. Let us begin to settle our differences amicably and peacefully. So this peaceful agreement, all right, of Westphalia ended the Third Year War, which engulfed Europe. All right. So this Treaty of Westphalia ended the, all right, ended the 30, all right, 30 years of disputes. All right, 30 years of disputes, all right, which engulf Europe. All right, like I usually say on team, we don't preach or encourage violence. All right, what we do is to educate and informate, give informations, educational and informational content based on the material provided by the National University of Nigeria. All right, so we have that as that. So now let's take a step further. Okay, so now this so now the Peace of Westphalia, which is Europe's settlement of 1648, all right, is also known as Euro, all right, settlement of Euro settlement of 1648. Euro settlement of 1648. So this treaty gave, according to what Omelewa, all right, Omolewa, all right, Omolewa, according to Omolewa, Mitchell Omolewa, all right, the Treaty of Westphalia gave credence, all right, approved of certain concepts, sovereign statehood, all right, whereby states have sovereignty to exercise. States have sovereignty to exercise, all right, have their own rule and exercise their own decision without external influence. Okay, it also encouraged what we call international law. These are law guiding and protecting countries, all right, from attacks or influence from other countries. And we also have this treaty also, all right, approved, okay, this treaty also approved of diplomacy and balance of power. So we have that as that. Now there's also something called the concept system. All right. The concept system, all right, of 1815. The concept system of 1815. All right. When the Napoleonic dispute nearly rooted the whole of, all right, Napoleonic, all right, dispute nearly rooted the whole of Europe. Okay. So we also have pre-colonial Africa. All right. When we say pre-colonial Africa, we're talking about what Africa used to be before colonial activities. So pre-colonial Africa too could trace the origin of its diplomatic relation to early times of African existence until the period of the transatlantic trade in slave, all right, and beads and other goods. All right. So we can also trace the history of diplomacy to the pre-colonial Africa society as well. So we have that as that. Okay. So now let's call it wrap here for today. Okay, but just before then, let's quickly touch on something called the practice of diplomacy. For the practice of diplomacy, all right, for diplomacy to flourish, there are practitioners officially appointed, all right, to perform diplomatic functions. All right. So we hear of diplomacy. Diplomacy is not just an abstract, all right, it's not just an imagination or an abstract idea. It's actually a serious business. All right. It's actually a system that must work. It's a concept that works. It's if it works, the working of this concept saves a lot of resources, lives, and other things from being wasted or lost. So now, when we talk about the practice of diplomacy, there are certain actors that are charged with certain responsibility, and the effectiveness of the diplomacy, all right, the effectiveness of a peaceful agreement, all right, this peaceful settlement is on their shoulder, all right. So there are people that are appointed to perform these diplomatic functions. Now, their qualities must include, all right. So to mention but a few, these actors must be very tact. All right. Some sort of tactical. All right. Must be very, all right, tact. Good negotiation skills. Good negotiation. They must have good negotiation skills. Okay. Self initiative. Self initiatives. Just to mention but a few. Okay. So let's take it up from representation in our next class. So thank you very much, everyone. I'm able to gain something in tonight's class. Please let's do to keep our notes up to date and submit them to the appropriate quarters. Is one way we use in measuring progress of students in the class. Okay, so so we're going to call it wrap here for today, like I said, and I think our next class should be on Friday, on Saturday, where we'll be taking the calculation for this course. Please, for those of us who are yet to become members, I'm pretty sure you might not be able to have access to I think that's Poll 212, if I'm not mistaken, with statistics and everything. So we are going to start it on Saturday. Please, for those of us who are not yet members, not gotten the membership badge, the class will only be available to the members. So do you want to get our membership badge? Just go straight here or our homepage here on YouTube and find the join button. Use it. It takes you directly to where you can get the membership badge. Thank you very much, Ma. I'm so sorry I had to delay the class to this extent. This class was supposed to be happening by now. It's supposed to happen before now. I will still have two more classes to go after now. So sorry. Please, Ma, you can reach out to me. Please drop me a DM. I need certain details, all right, to make certain arrangements based on our retrospective arrangements. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Miss Tasha. Do have a wonderful night and bye for now.